All right, on this edition of Torrey's Top 10, we've got the top 16 things you need to know about Chapter 1. Number 16. You should know what bioethics is. You should understand that bioethics is concerned with the morality, the right and wrong of the actions that we do, and the goodness and badness of our character with respect to the specific issues that come up in the medical field. So in healthcare, in medical science, in medical research. There are a number of different important moral issues that come up in the field of bioethics, and many of these issues are issues that you yourself will face as a healthcare practitioner, or as a patient, or as a family member. So bioethics is a way of applying normative ethics, moral principles, moral arguments, to specific issues within medical practice and research. Number 15. You should be able to answer the question, what is morality? This is a pretty big question, but you should have a basic understanding of what we mean when we talk about morality and ethics. Morality concerns our basic beliefs and questions about right and wrong actions and good and bad character. So morality is concerned with our moral judgments, what we judge to be right and wrong, good and bad, the moral principles that we rely on to make those judgments, the particular rules and standards that we follow, the moral theories that we appeal to formulate our principles and rules, as well as the actions that we choose to perform. Morality is distinct from ethics. As we said, when we talk about morality and morals, we're talking about the judgments and theories and principles that we use to make judgments about what we should do, what's good and bad, what's right and wrong, what kind of character we should have. Ethics, on the other hand, is the study of morality. So ethics is a process. It's something that we do. We use philosophical tools and methods, methodology. We use moral theories, critical reasoning, logical arguments, and careful critical reflection to do ethics. Ethics is a practice. It's something that we do. Number 14. What is descriptive ethics? Descriptive ethics is not typically what we refer to when we're doing ethics. Descriptive ethics is a scientific approach to ethics. It is descriptive. It describes the facts about people's behaviors, beliefs, and experiences. It's an empirical investigation. It explains how people actually do live. Sociologists and anthropologists do descriptive ethics. They look at a society or a group of people and they say, oh, this is how those people live. This is how they make moral decisions. Descriptive ethics describes the morality of a group of people. This is not philosophical ethics. This is not questions about how we should live. Which brings us to number 13. What is normative ethics? Normative ethics is what we're typically referring to when we talk about ethics from a philosophical perspective. Normative ethics asks about the norms of ethical behavior. That is, asks about the norms of moral behavior. So normative ethics is the branch of ethics that is searching for justifiable moral standards that can help to guide us in making choices and judgments about right and wrong, good and bad. So in this branch of ethics, we are asking that Socratic question, how should I live? What should I do? This goes beyond a mere description of how people do live. Number 12, what is metaethics? Along with descriptive and normative ethics, metaethics is another branch of philosophical ethics that is concerned with the study of the meaning of moral theories and how we justify relying on certain moral theories. Not necessarily how we justify an action as right or wrong, that's in the realm of normative ethics. But metaethics takes a step back, it's a step above, and asks, how should we talking about morality? So it's a higher level, higher order discussion. We're talking about how we talk about ethics. Number 11, what is applied ethics? Just like it sounds, applied ethics is a branch of ethics where we make use of moral theories, moral principles, moral concepts to resolve practical moral issues that come up. There are lots of different areas of applied ethics, including things like business ethics or legal ethics, and certainly medical or bioethics. And applied ethics takes those theories and concepts and principles from normative ethics and uses them to solve particular moral issues by asking, how can these theories and arguments and concepts and principles help us to answer the question of what we should do given this particular aspect of life? So rather than merely ask something like, is it always wrong to kill? We will ask questions about the rightness and wrongness of euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide by applying questions about right to life, right to death, to this specific area of life. Number 10, what is moral objectivism? Moral objectivism is a concept that describes the idea that a moral principle, or at least some moral principles, are true objectively for everyone. They're not relative to a certain person or group's belief systems, but they are objectively true. Number 9, what is moral absolutism? Moral absolutism is different than moral objectivism. Moral absolutism is a concept that conveys the idea that there are no exceptions to an objective moral principle. For example, if we say that do not kill an innocent person is objectively true, no matter who you are or whether you believe it or not, we could either be an absolutist about that rule, or we could be an objectivist without being an absolutist. If we take do not kill an innocent person to be an objective rule and to be an absolute rule, that means that the rule do not kill an innocent is true for everybody. It would be wrong for anybody to kill an innocent person. But it would also mean that there's never an exception to that moral principle. Even if you could save the life of 500 other innocents, you should never, ever kill an innocent person. However, you might be a moral objectivist and say, yeah, it is wrong for anyone to kill an innocent person. But to deny that that rule is absolute. That is, you might say, well, actually, there are some exceptions to that rule. They might be rare, but in the case that killing one innocent person could save the lives of, say, 100,000 innocent people, you might say it is morally permissible, possibly even morally obligatory, to kill that one innocent person in order to save the lives of 100,000 innocent people. So objectivism means there is a moral principle or a moral rule that's true for everyone. It's not dependent upon anyone's belief system. But moral absolutism states that there's never an exception to a particular objective moral principle. Number 8, what is ethical relativism? Ethical relativism is the idea that moral standards are not objective. Rather, that moral standards are relative to what a person or a group of persons, a culture, believes to be true. So there are no objective moral truths according to ethical relativism. If Hitler believes that people of Jewish descent, blacks, gays deserve to be murdered, then it's right and good for Hitler to murder those people. If John Doe believes that having sex with children is right and good, then it's right and good for John Doe to have sex with children. A lot of people tend to think that ethical relativism is a good idea because it means that we don't judge what other cultures do. And it promotes a kind of tolerance. But ethical relativism doesn't actually promote tolerance. It promotes ethical relativism. And I hope it's pretty clear to see that if you believe in ethical relativism, pretty much anything can be right and good as long as one person or one group of people believes that it's right and good. So there's a distinction between tolerating diversity and difference among cultures and believing that anything a person or culture does is okay so long as they believe it to be okay. Number 7. What is a moral principle? Moral principles help us to guide our behavior and make moral judgments about right and wrong. As we've already said, absolutism is the view that moral principles have no exceptions. We'll learn more about this when we talk about Kantian deontology. Prima facie moral principles apply unless there is an exception warranted. And an exception is typically warranted when a principle is in conflict with another moral principle. Welcome to bioethics. We are going to be talking a lot about how one moral principle is in conflict with another moral principle throughout this course. There are a number of different moral principles. The primary ones that we will be concerned with this semester are the principles of autonomy, beneficence, utility, and justice. We're going to see these over and over again, and we are going to deal with conflicts between and among these principles. Like, we know that beneficence is a moral principle that we should follow, and we know that autonomy is a moral principle that we should follow. But in applied ethics, when we start to look at these particular issues, it's going to become clear that we can't simply follow all of these principles without conflict. It's going to be up to us to reason about what is right in a given situation and which of these principles takes precedence or overrules in that situation. Number 6, what is autonomy? Autonomy is a very important moral principle, one that we will be dealing with consistently throughout the course of the semester. And the principle of autonomy states that people should be allowed to exercise their capacity for self-determination. We have a right not to be interfered with, and that right should be respected. That is, we have the right to make decisions about our bodies. We are rational beings with the capacity for making those decisions, and that capacity should be respected. Number 5, what is beneficence and what is nonmalefacence? Beneficence is a moral principle holding that you ought to do good to others and avoid doing them harm. Nonmalefacence, of course, is a very important principle in bioethics. In the medical field, practitioners take an oath, the Hippocratic Oath, where they agree to do no harm. Beneficence, however, goes further than doing no harm. Beneficence requires that we actively do good for others, that we act in the best interest of others, that we try to bring about good when we care for others. Number 4, what is utility? Utility is a moral principle which holds that you ought to produce the most good and the least bad. It's a cost-benefit analysis, urging us to weigh the risks and the rewards and choose the action, do the thing that results in the greatest amount of good and the least amount of bad. We will see how this principle is the backbone of one of the major ethical theories that we were looking at this term. Of course, utilitarianism. Number 3, What is justice? Justice is another moral principle stating that people ought to get what is fair or what is due to them, that equals should be treated equally. We'll be looking at justice particularly in the final section of the course when we look at healthcare justice. Number 2. What is the relationship between ethics and religion? One ethical theory that we'll look at briefly is the divine command theory. Basically, this theory states that the actions that are right, the things that are good, are those things that are commanded by God. However, both religious scholars and secular scholars question the validity of divine command theory. Plato himself questioned the divine command theory thousands of years ago in one of the Platonic dialogues called Euthyphro. And this resulted in what is now referred to as the Euthyphro dilemma. The dilemma goes a little something like this. If divine command theory is right, that is, if right actions or good things are those things that are commanded by God, then it's either the case that whatever God commands is good because God commands it, or that God commands whatever already is good. And this is the Euthyphro dilemma. Both religious and non-religious folks have a real problem with the Euthyphro dilemma. If we take the first scenario, if it's the case that whatever God commands is good, this seems problematic because what is good is completely arbitrary. That is, God could command anything, like thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not eat shellfish. And this seems problematic because we don't generally believe that what is good and right is arbitrary. That whether or not we eat shellfish is necessarily a moral concern. On the other side of that dilemma is the idea that whatever God commands is good, and God commands it because it's good. And if that's the case, we're able to get away from the arbitrariness of the first horn of the dilemma, and the problem then is that this horn of the Euthyphro dilemma undermines the divine command theory itself. If God commands what is good, then there's already a standard of good separate from God, and God becomes unnecessary, irrelevant. And finally, the number one thing that you should know about Chapter 1 is what a moral argument is. We're going to be talking a lot about moral arguments, how to read them, how to analyze them, how to write them. But you should understand that moral arguments are not about intuition or opinion. When we do ethics, we're giving moral arguments. That is, we're using critical reasoning about ethical issues, and we're going to use logical principles as well as moral principles. There are a couple different kinds of arguments, deductive and inductive. I don't want you to worry too much about this right now, but generally, a deductive argument is an argument where if all of the premises were true, the conclusion would follow necessarily. Whereas an inductive argument is an argument where if the premises are true, the conclusion most likely follows. And both of these types of arguments are important in doing ethics. And the principle the Euthyphro. And again, both obviously. In fact, they would. And how we. Bella! No, Frank. No. That's so meta, brah.